All right, then, it's a good afternoon to you. Of course, we are checking in on this market picture, which certainly has had quite a few interesting elements of late, particularly out with the retail investors and how much they've had impact on the market picture. Overall, though, things are looking fairly good. Green across the board. It is a good afternoon to you indeed. Asia going up 1.25% there, sitting a little bit higher, 29,248 points for the Hang Seng by close of trade. You will see a lot more green across the global spectrum, and that global picture, as you can tell there, that follows on from the US picture yesterday, which saw positivity through to it as well. We're also seeing the European market also sitting in some positivity this lunchtime trade, 1.75% higher for the CAC 40 out in France. The DAX out in Germany also performing better. It's 1.33% better off. Only slightly higher though is the all share index, but still some positivity there, which we certainly are still enjoying as well. 1.25% higher for the financials, being some of the biggest gainers today, and that's because the banking shares have actually gone up nearly 2%, as despite Nedbank getting censured, and we'll talk about what that actually means as well in the latest news developments. With regards to resources, we're up 1.75% as well for the resource picture, going up to 60,310 points. Both gold and platinum miners going down. It seems that retail investors have decided to pull back out of the likes of silver as well, which means that the commodity picture isn't looking as rosy as it did previously, because those retail investors decided, well, perhaps we can shake things up here and not necessarily go into gold as hard as some may have thought. Industrials are a little bit higher though. That's really based on the Asian picture going slightly to a more positive tilt there. Of course, Naspers process all being affected on this path. If that goes higher, this generally will go higher as well. Onto the companies that have gone higher today. Rhodes Foods is also sitting more than 5% to the good as well today, so enjoying some positivity. But unfortunately, African Rainbow Minerals, following that in sort of negative shift then that the market has certainly had today, and following through on that from the resource point of view, the likes of Steinhoff and Cura also struggling then, going down more than 6% there too. Onto the commodities board then, you're seeing, as I said a little bit earlier, negativity for the platinum and gold miners. Platinum going down 2.25%. In fact, in this lunchtime trading picture, $1,102 a fine ounce there. Brent crude is sitting slightly higher though, 2.2%. Still a whole lot more questions around supply being asked. It does seem that a lot of the OPEC nations have decided that they will indeed restrict how much supply, as they had promised to, of course, in an earlier meeting in January. They have said that they will restrict supply in February and restrict supply in March, and it seems like they are doing that. If you have less supply in the market, demand seems to pick up seemingly, and then you're obviously going to get a higher fuel price there indeed, or higher oil price. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well with our analysts. We're also back below 15 Rand against the US dollar today. When it comes to the local currency, we're 2/3% better off. Some strength against the euro and some strength against the British pound, with Bitcoin also gaining 3.8%. Let's have a chat then to Owen Nkomo from Nkunzi Wealth, who joins us now to get just a whiff of this market picture. Owen, it's a good afternoon to you. Actually, I think Happy New Year as well to you. We haven't spoken this year, but certainly seems that markets are going to be as turbulent as last year, perhaps for slightly different reasons. And one of those is the oil price. Headed towards $60 a barrel, do you reckon?
Yeah, look, Arabile, thank you so much for hosting me on the show today. Happy New Year to you. It's the first time we're speaking this year, but certainly the oil price has done only one thing since December. It's been on the upwardly trend since then. It's trading at 57.75 as I speak to you, and I think in a matter of days I'll see it at $60. And once it hits 60, it's a big psychological level for the technical traders, and I expect that you might see now start to head to $70 for one barrel, and it just cannot be good news for us, Arabile.
Yeah, it certainly isn't. But if you see the local currency trade below 15 Rand against the US dollar, that perhaps is some sort of hope, surely?
Look, I mean, the currency firming up. I think we're playing the vaccines are being distributed globally now. We're seeing lots of presidents receiving the vaccine dosages for their countries. Some starting to administer that, and the thought process behind that is that when people get vaccines, you will start to see a bit more productivity coming back to the economy, and this might just be the turning point for global economic weakness at this stage. We are going back to a point where potentially we're going to see people go back to work, and you are seeing the currencies firming up against the US dollar. So too is the rand, trading below 15 today, and I think that's what's keeping the South African markets a little bit under pressure relative to the rest of the world. We're only up 0.1% this afternoon, whereas the international markets are trading 1 3/4 higher today on the back of this risk-on trade that we're seeing, as people are starting to discount the fact that at least this year, probably by the middle of the year, we might see an abatation in terms of infections in the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, that'll certainly be good news for the market picture as well. Demand for a whole host of things, from oil right through to the resources. The rest of the resources will certainly be interesting as well. All right, let's talk then very quickly about the news to have come out as well today on the JSE front. Just some censure news, particularly with regards to Rebosis, Nedbank in play on that picture as well. Let's talk about what exactly that is. What is actually going on here, Owen?
Yeah, so the property sector has been going through challenges, few companies going through challenges and delaying reporting. And Rebosis was one of those companies. And I think, the important element to come out of the SENS announcement that came out today is the JSE is now starting to take action against people that are not just the company managers of this business, but their advisors and potentially their bankers, and corporate sponsors out there. And this is what has happened in this announcement that came out on Rebosis, where Nedbank is taking the brunt of the JSE censorship there, where the JSE has issued what they call a public censor to say, we see what you've done, we're unhappy with it, don't do it again. There's no financial burden being levied against Nedbank at this stage. It's just what they call a public censure. But it's quite embarrassing for a big bank like that that's been playing in the property space for so long to essentially have allowed, Rebosis to publish numbers that had irregularities or that still has some questions that needed to be answered. And the JSE is saying that we see what you have done. You shouldn't have allowed this to happen. And indeed, one might say potentially maybe the auditors of the company as well might get the same censorship from the responsible authorities as soon as as soon as the necessary steps get taken. But it's important to see the JSE cracking the whip in the sector, which actually collapsed and cost a lot of people cash. Arabile.
Yeah, certainly very important for them to do so, at least seen to be doing something very good in this instance as well. Oh, and very quickly though, this week and last week, perhaps you could say this year, has so far been plagued by retail investors and just what they've been able to do to one little stock called GameStop, which didn't have any hope of survival for the longest time and now seemingly looks like it had or could have gone as far as it wanted to. But could something like GameStop, like how the Reddit people could certainly get involved in the local market and start pushing up some of the stocks, should we worry that something like that could happen on the South African front too?
Look, I think the American markets and the Asian markets have got very deeper participation by the retail market. You're talking multiples of billions of dollars being paid in that market, but obviously on a relative basis to the size of those markets, it might be smaller compared to the institutional players. But if you start to compare with South Africa, it's even a smaller amount of players that are playing in these listed markets in South Africa that could have a big influence on share prices. But where you had that happening was in African Bank. You had the same thing happening in Steinhoff, and then you also had the same thing happening in Sasol, where retail players started to dabble in the stocks because it was in the news, it was topical. People thought these stocks are cheap, and the retail investors started to participate. But I must say that the institutions got the better of the retail traders, particularly with the exception of Sasol, because the retail players played well in Sasol. They bought those stocks. If they were patient and held the stock up to now, they'll be making money. But I don't think that we are at a stage where the retail players in the JSE are going to be able to push against, the developed institutional players at this stage. There's just so much institutional money at play, and they'll drive the stocks in the direction that they want the stocks to go to.
Yeah, it will be very difficult, and I suppose very interesting. This market certainly does have shifts and twists and turns, and you never know. As institutional investors, things could certainly change up. Owen, appreciate the time, though. Always good chatting to you. Thank you so much for the time. We'll hopefully chat again then. Owen Nkomo there from Nkunzi Wealth joining us to unpack this market picture. A whole host of elements still, of course, happening across the globe. The news of the vaccines means that markets can begin to open up. Growth can begin to take place as well. We'll continue to give you the latest, though, when it comes to news from locally and across the globe. Stay tuned for that next.